The next thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and create a couple of windows here across the top of the platform. And to facilitate that, I went ahead and made a new scene. And the scene can be made at any time. You can just come up and open up your scenes palette and click on a plus sign, create a new scene, and they'll show up right here across the top. Now, this is a great example of where you want the camera to be in perspective mode. And what that allows me to do is see these individual corners here at the same time without having to do a whole bunch of orbiting. So let's just go ahead and put in a face. I'll just pick that endpoint right there and come up to, I'd like to find about halfway, but this is all grouped together, so I'll just go ahead and click about there. And then I'll zoom out here just a little bit, type in P for push-pull, and pull this out so that it's flush with the face of the railing. And then I'm just going to push it in just a little bit. Then I'll come back to my window scene and start to do some layout work. So for that, I'll use the tape measure and come across to the midpoint. And I'll pull out maybe, say, 1 inch here. Pull out here, type in a 1 and hit enter. And I'll pull over here, oh, I don't know. We'll say 9 inches. And I'll pull over here and type in 9. Then I will pull up from the bottom, maybe about that much, and then about that much, and then pull up here maybe about 1 inch. And again, you can make this any way you want. And then I'll just go ahead and start to draw. So R for rectangle. So I'll put an opening there, an opening there. And then I'm going to use my arc tool to go from here to here and pull up. The exact amount doesn't matter. And then use my line tool to finish these openings like that. And then one from there over to there. So now I'll just go ahead and use my push-pull tool and mouse back until I get some inference. Might have to zoom in a little bit. There we go. So when I click, it creates an opening, and then I can just double click, which will repeat the push-pull command at the exact same distance. Here, here, and here. And then I'll come back into this view here. And that looks pretty good, so I don't need my guidelines anymore, so I'm just going to go ahead and erase those. And then I'll use my select tool to triple click on this panel here. I'll right click, make it a component. I'll just call it Windows. So now that we've made this window panel a component, we can just find it in our components window and bring it over, and I'm just going to drop it right there on that corner so that everything gets lined up. And then as long as I'm in the move command, I'll click to move it down to this corner. And then we can come into this space here and draw a line across here, which will make a new face. And then use our push-pull tool to pull up. Oh, it did not make a new face because this line back here is part of the group. So instead of making a line, let's just come in here and make a rectangle that goes from here back to there. And that makes a new face that we can then take and pull up, even with that top edge. And there's a number of ways that you could accomplish the same thing. The last thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and paint those components. So let's see here. I'll go to my colors. And then I guess we'll just pick a nice green. Make it any color you want. and paint these components. And then we'll move on to the next step. The next thing I'll go ahead and do is I'm going to put in this ramp right here, and it basically goes from this top corner down to the inside of these 2x6s. I can't tell if it's built out of 2x4s or 2x6s, but I'll go ahead and go with 2x6s. And then we'll put in these boards. And then finally we'll put in some little knobby things and a rope for the kids to climb on. So let's go to our front isometric view here. And I'll point out here that at this point, all of this structure is a group. So if you have not done that yet, select all of your geometry, right click, and you'll see a context menu that'll allow you to make it a group. Because if you don't do that, things are going to get sticky. And if you don't understand what that means, you certainly will by the time you get done trying to work with this chapter of the tutorial. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in a rectangular plane here. And I'll start it about right there and come down and attach it to the end of the 2x4 right there, so that I can do some drawing here or make my 2x6s. Now this plane here is separate. Now there's a little bit of inference down here where the two planes exist, but that's going to be just fine. So I'm going to start with a line, and I'll start it right up here, and I'll come down to this corner. Then I'll use my tape measure tool to offset that, and I'll just pull down to make sure I'm on a surface here. I will click and then type in 5.5, which is the dimensions of a 2x6. So I'm orbiting around here to make sure that's all on the same plane. And then with that in place, I'm just going to go ahead and draw a line from up here to here, down to there, and down to there, which should create a separate face. Although I must have missed something here. So let's try that one more time from that endpoint down to there. And there we go. So let's come in and do a little bit of erasing now. So I'll click that face and delete it, that face and delete it, and then erase that. And then I can go ahead and use my push-pull tool to pull this out 1.5 inches, which is the thickness of a 2x6. So I'll now take and triple click on my 2x6 here. I'm going to right click and make it a group, and then go ahead and move it. I'll grab that point right up there at the top, start to pull it across on the green axis, type my Option key to make a copy, and pull it to right there. And that does line up with the base of these 2x6s right there. It only needs to be close enough. And then let's go ahead and make the steps, or the boards. So the boards go on top, so I'm going to go ahead and select my rectangle tool. I'm going to come across to this face here, and let's see, I'm looking down at my measurements dialog box. I'd like the width of the board to be about 5.5 inches. So I'm going to turn on X-ray and continue to mouse down along here. There we go. I can mouse right along that edge. That's about 5 inches there. So I'll click on that, P for push-pull, turn off X-ray here, and pull this out. I'm just going to say 1 inch because that's kind of what it looks like. And then I'm going to triple click on this board and make it a group. And then I am going to move it. Let's see, I need to kind of come around here so I can see this edge. There we go. So M for move, and I'll just grab a corner there. Again, tap my Option key and pull it right up to that top edge there. And now I need to fill in that space to save some time. So I'm going to just say 5 divided by, hit enter. Let's try 8 divided by, And that's looking better. Let's try 9 divided by. And I think that's pretty good. Yeah, it's just a little bit of a gap there. So depending upon the width of the boards that you make, you'll go ahead and pick a different command. But as long as they're not overlapping one into the other, that's going to be just fine. The next thing I'm going to make are these little climbing blocks. I'm just going to call them things. I don't know what they're really called, to be honest. But let's go ahead and get started. Now, before I do that, I think I'm going to have a little bit of fun here. I'm going to click on my paint bucket tool, and I'm going to come up under my materials, and I'm going to go to wood, and I'm going to take a look at the different thumbnails here. This is like wood flooring of different types. But what's this one here? Okay, cherry wood. Now these are just all JPEG images. So let's see what this one looks like. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to stick with that. You can make yours wild colors if you want. It doesn't have to be a wood color. You can paint it, but this is the effect that you get. And the reason that everything got painted was that this part right here, this is a group. We grouped it together. So likewise, this ramp here, this is not a group. So if I wanted to make this wood, I'd have to come in and do each board. But there's lots of reasons I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is come through, hold down my shift key, and select all the individual boards that make this ramp, including this sideboard here. And hold down my shift key and pick that one, and then right click and make it a group. Now that saves me a little bit of time when it comes to painting it. But it also locks all of this geometry in place so that other things don't stick to it. And by other things, I'm talking about these things that I'm going to come in and draw next. So I'll just click outside there. And I'm going to go ahead and make my first thing. And I'm going to use the freehand tool. And I'm just going to kind of draw a blob-like shape, like so, and close it. And that's drawn on the face, as you can tell, because if I orbit around, I get that inference. I'm going to choose P for push-pull, and I'm going to pull it up, I'll say 2 inches. I'm not sure if that's the magic amount. Matter of fact, that looks a little thick, so I'll type in 1.5 without clicking on the mouse. And we'll call that good. So now I'm going to triple click on that, and I'm going to make this a component. I could also make it a group, but making it a component gives me some extra advantages, which I'll show you. I'm just going to call it a thing. It doesn't matter what I call it, as long as I know what it's called. And you can see over here in my components window, which I just accidentally closed, a thing shows up. So let's go ahead and try moving another thing over here, and I want to place it on the face. I'll put it up here towards the top. I'm going to orbit around to make sure it's not floating in space, and you know what? It is, isn't it? So let's go ahead and move that down to where it's now on the face. It's still moving around just a little bit. I thought I had it. So I'm going to take this point and bring it back until it's on the face in the group. So that's a little bit of work there, isn't it? Let's try a move. So we'll try moving this. I'll grab a point along the face of the group, and I'll pull down. I need to tap my Option key so it makes a copy. And let's try putting that's on an edge of a group, and then I'll tap my Shift key, and that'll keep it on the face. And then I'll go 5 divided by, and it makes a whole bunch of them. And those should all be on the face. And when I say on the face, I'm talking about the face of the group or those boards. And so now let's make a little quicker work of that. Let's take, and I'll hold down my shift key while selecting this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. And then I'll type M for move. I'll click a point on the face. I'll pull it along the green axis, which will keep it on the face. I'll type in my option key and put them over there. And then I think I'll delete this one here. And then I can just go ahead and move them around a little bit. So and then I'll have some more fun. I'll come in with my paint bucket tool. And this time I'm just going to go to the colors palette. And you can pick any colors you want, of course. I'm looking for a nice red. I guess that's about as close as I'll get. So I'll make that red, maybe that one. And then look for some yellows. And then a green. And it looks like I think we need some blues. So there's my things on there, and I think that's looking pretty good. So the next thing we want to do is make the rope. So to make the rope, you're going to be tempted, and I know this because I've done it myself, to start up here and, like with the freehand tool, just start to draw a rope. But as you can see, it disappears. We turn on X-ray here, you can see that the rope actually goes behind the slide. So that's not a very satisfactory solution. At the same time, if you try to draw a segmented one, say maybe to there, and then down to there, and over to there, and down to there, and out like this, as you orbit around, you can see that it kind of jumps all over the place. So that's not very good either. So we'll undo that work, and I'll show you how I like to do it. I'm sure there's probably 3 or 4 different ways at least that are smarter than what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it this way. So I'm going to start in the middle on the face of that 2x4, and I'm just going to come out along the red axis maybe a few inches. In this case it turned out to be 5.5. Then I'm going to go to side view where I can see that line, and I'll hit escape, and then I'll continue my line from here down along the blue axis like so, and then down along here, and then along the red axis. And then I'll orbit around to make sure that it's running somewhat down the middle. And that actually is. Now, it doesn't look too rope-like because of all the right angles. So let's take care of that. So I'm going to click on that line segment to delete it. And I'll type in A for arc. And I'll start here, and I'll come down along here, and I'll mouse up until I get that cyan or kind of light blue colored line, and I'll click, and then I'll erase this segment and this segment. So I've now kind of got a smooth bend in my rope. So do the same thing, A for arc. I'll just click at some point here, maybe about some point there, and then I will mouse along the line until it tells me that it's tangent, and then I'll delete that and that, and come down to the bottom and do the same thing. So A for arc, maybe from there to there, and mouse along this bottom line segment until it tells me that it's tangent, and delete that and that. So let's go back to our view here, And that looks a lot more rope-like. I mean, granted, it's not going to be floating off of that angled face, but it does the trick. So now to turn it into a rope, I'm going to type in C for circle and put a circle on this face, maybe 1/2 inch. So I'll put in 0.5. And then here's where the magic happens. So you have to follow this very, very carefully because the steps are quite deliberate. We're going to use the follow me tool to take this circle and extrude it or get it to follow this path. So what you want to do to minimize the number of mouse clicks is to select the path. So I'm going to double click on my path so that it's selected. Then I'm going to click on the follow me tool, and then I'm going to come up and I'm going to click on this circle, and there we go. Now it did make a little bit of a bifugality there, but that's not a big deal. What I should have done is had it come out straight out of this board for maybe 1 inch or so, and then that face would have been perpendicular. So, but I'll go ahead and fix that separate from the screencast. So at this point, I'm going to grab all that geometry, right click, make it a component, and I'm going to call it my rope. And then I'll grab my paint bucket tool. So I'll pick a lighter color, maybe this one, and paint it, maybe a little darker. There we go. And we now have the rope for our playset. So I went ahead and fixed my rope, and I just want to take a moment to clarify it. By the way, I changed the color to yellow, and I might change the material also to give it a little bit more texture, if you will. But I'm going to turn on X-ray here. And this was my path right here. And when I made the arc, I started the end point right here where it touched the wood, and it immediately started to bend or curve, and that's what created that bifugality that we had. So what I did was I just made a small straight stretch and then started my arc, and that helped make the rope look just a whole bunch better. Now the next part we're going to make are just going to be these steps right here. And that's probably pretty easy by now. We need access for this opening right here. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm just going to go ahead now and zoom in here and find a face that I can again make a rectangle on. There's other ways to do this, but I want my rectangle to come out, and I'm going to use my arrow keys to toggle so that I get a rectangle about right there. And then with that in place, I can just go ahead and start to draw my steps. So let's see, I think I'll start down here and draw a line out like that. Hit escape, come up here, and come down maybe like so. And then hit escape again, and then I'll come down here like this and come under like that. And let's see, I want it to be parallel, so I'll just kiss off that point. There we go. So now it's parallel, so I'll just click there, and then I'll pull down to there and across to there, and I've now got the surface for my board. So P for push pull, pull this out 1.5 inches, and then I'm going to do some erasing. So I will now just go ahead and triple click on that and group it, and then I'm going to move it. So M for move. So I will pick point right there, start to pull it across along the red axis, tap my Option key or Alt key and put it about right there. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So now all we need to do is make the steps. So I will now come in and start up about there, come across the green axis, come up 1.5 inches, and then come across here, and then I'm going to kiss off that edge, click and click, and then P for push pull. So I will pull this across so that it's even with that edge. So now I'll go ahead and triple click on that. Did I get it all? Yep, looks like I got it all. So I'm going to right click, make that a group, and then finally M for move. I'll grab that, pull it up along here, tap my Option or Alt key, and let's see. There we go. That's what you're looking for, those lines right there. So I'll click on that, and then without clicking anywhere else, I'm just going to go, I'm just going to guess 5 divided by, maybe 4 divided by. And I like that. So now I'm going to take and hold down my Shift key, select all of the elements that make up the ladder. I'm going to right click, make it a component, and call it ladder. The last step is to paint it. You know, actually what I'll do to show you something new here is that, say I don't remember what color I picked for the rest of the wood. Well, I could click on this eyedropper tool and come and pick my wood right here, and then click on that, and it's a perfect match. So there's our stairs at this point. So we'll go ahead and continue.